Well, we've only got a few minutes together this morning, so I'm going to dive straight in. And I want to kick off with a bit of fun this morning, because I reckon fun is underrated at most corporate gatherings. And that's why I love being on the program with Dan, because Dan always brings the fun. That's one of the things I love about this man. But we're going to kick off with a game this morning. This is a game I've been working on with a couple of my clients at conferences recently. And it's a game called Were You Paying Attention? And here's what's going to happen in a few moments. So I want to take you back to high school science, probably about maybe year 10 or year 11. Something you would have learnt in high school science in year 10 or 11. And I wonder how many of you here were paying attention. Okay, this might stretch a few of you this morning. So here's the question I want to ask you. The question is, which law of physics states that all matter left to itself will tend toward decline or decay and disintegration? Okay, I'm going to give you four options. It'll be a multiple choice. Is it A, the law of atrophy? Is it B, the law of dystrophy? Is it C, the law of entropy? Or is it D, the law of dysentery? Okay, so I'll give you a few moments to have a think, confer perhaps with the person next to you, and let's do a straw poll. Who thinks it's A, the law of atrophy? Hands up if you think it's A. A number of us do. Okay, who thinks it's B, the law of dystrophy? Hands up. A few of you. Okay, C, the law of entropy. Okay, quite a number. Who thinks it's D, the law of dysentery? There's normally one in every crowd, or there's two on the same. Table 11, we'll watch that table right there. Okay, how many of you reckon you were away sick this day? You've got no idea what the correct answer is, a number of you. All right, correct answer is actually C, the law of entropy. And it's interesting, remember in school our teachers would say stuff like, pay attention because one day you'll need this stuff. And we all said, as if, because we were like 15 and knew everything at that age, of course. And I reckon when Mr. Davies, my year 10 science teacher, taught us this stuff as well, I bet I said the same thing, as if I'll ever need this. Not knowing, a few years later, the law of entropy would be at the core of a lot of my research. I mean, I've spent the last 6 years looking at how the law of entropy applies to the whole world of business. I mean, I've spent 12 or 13 years now looking at the whole theme of change. Social change, business change. A bit like Scott, I'm often put in that space of the futurist label, looking at what's happening, what are the key disruptions unfolding, what's coming next. But for me, a really key year in my research was 2011. Because that's the year we saw a number of massive iconic brands, some in fact that Scott mentioned, that fell prey to this very law of entropy. And of course, in the last few years, there's been many that have followed suit, brands that have had a pretty tough trot. Some brands that are better than they were a few years ago, they're on the rise again, but many brands that have had a really tough time. And a lot of my research for a few years there looked at what we could learn from these businesses in order to avoid falling into the same trap. But here is a more interesting story, I suspect, than that collection of brands. It's this collection here. And these are brands that, regardless of what has changed around them, whatever disruption has hit, they've managed to stay at the cutting edge. They've had high-performance cultures that allowed them to stay hot, vibrant, market leaders for years, decades. In some cases, look at a few of the brands up here, centuries at a time. And the question I'd ask you, of course, looking at that list is, what do you think it's allowed them to stay at the cutting edge? And I imagine some of you would think, well, Scott talked about innovation, so did Dan. Probably innovation's got something to do with it. Maybe it's about strategy. And yet, can I put it to you, the one factor all these businesses have in common is a word we will hear a whole lot over the next few weeks at the Olympics as we hear commentary of races and records that have fallen. We've heard it a lot as we've discussed election campaigns in recent months, and it's this word here. It's the word momentum. Now remember in school we learned a formula for momentum. We were taught that momentum equals velocity times mass. And I want to give you a very different formula for momentum here today, and it's the business formula for momentum. Whether you're talking at a macro brand level, when I'm consulting with big businesses, the same principles apply, or even you as an individual professional, the same principles for building unstoppable growth and momentum in your life and in your business. And there's three factors. If you've got a pen and paper, old school, I love Peter's old school approach. Grab out your pens. Here's a quick formula for momentum. We'll unpack these three elements over the next few minutes. Momentum equals A plus F times C. So let's unpack these. The A stands for activity. And that's no huge surprise. I mean, if you're going to build momentum, activity's got to be part of it, because momentum is about movement and motion. And yet here's the key. Not all activity is created equal. There is no point you going in 100 miles an hour if you're heading in the wrong direction, even if you're only off track by a couple of degrees. The faster you go, the harder you work, the further you go, the more off track you get. And this is a challenge I find with so many of my clients. They'll say, we are working our backsides off, we are at capacity, we're doing all the things we feel like we should do, and we're still just not getting cut through, we're not getting traction, we're not building momentum. And the question, of course, is why is this? And I want to give you a simple reason. Let's be really honest here. Most of us don't know what we're doing. And I don't mean that in the sense that we're incompetent. I mean that most of us are operating so unconsciously, we are not aware of the things we're doing every single day. According to Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a neuroscientist at Stanford, upwards of 95% of what we do every day in our professional roles, we do unconsciously. And that's why the frames that Dan was talking about are so important. Because we operate in the unconscious. And when I'm working with businesses, and like many of the speakers you've heard today, a lot of my work is around how to build innovation cultures and develop an agile mindset. First step to doing that is to become intentional, become aware of the stuff you're actually doing every single day. And yet, here's the interesting thing. It's not just about being aware of what you're doing so you can do things differently. A key part of intentionality is this: becoming aware of the stuff you used to do that you're not doing anymore. Because I want to tell you, 9 times out of 10, you encounter a business or an individual that is stalled, growth has come off the boil, times are tough. The most important question for them is this one up on the screen here, the question of, what have you stopped doing? What did you used to do when you were first building success and momentum that you've maybe gone into that autopilot mode and you've stopped doing over the past? What are the basics? They're not sexy, but they get results. Because they're often the unconscious things that are part of the secret sauce, and some of you need to go back to the things you've forgotten to do as you've specialized and grown over the years. So activity, being intentional, is the first key to building momentum. Second key, the F, stands for focus. Now I wonder how many of you have gone into a bar or a restaurant in recent weeks and encountered a scene something like this up on the screen here. Everyone's plugged in, connected to phones. Who here secretly judges people who do this, just out of interest? Come on, hands up. Most of us do. I do too. And then I discover myself doing the same thing. And that's the challenge. In fact, if you want to realize how addicted you are and how distracted you are by your phone, download an app. You can do it while we're talking here if you like, called Checky, C-H-E-C-K-Y. It will tell you how often you check your phone every day. I downloaded this a few weeks back, and here's what I discovered. I downloaded it 7 hours after I downloaded the app. I checked. I had actually unlocked my phone and checked it 74 times in 6 hours. And don't you judge me. You try it and see how often you do it. And this is the challenge. We are so profoundly addicted. Our capacity to be in the moment, to concentrate, to focus, is under greater attack than ever before. And psychologists talk about the danger of this from a mental health perspective, but even from a physical health perspective. Do you know, last year, according to Pew Research, 8,000 pedestrians in the US were either seriously injured or killed because they wandered into traffic distracted by their phones. Now, are the Americans any more dumb as pedestrians than the rest of us? I mean, there is the Trump factor, so the jury is still out, I guess. But reality is, it's just that they bothered to count up the numbers. They've done the research. But we are all so incredibly distracted. Now, you take this into the workplace, and it is as significant. According to the University of California in Irvine, the average office worker today is interrupted, or, here's the key, self-interrupts every 3 minutes. And you might think, gosh, 3 minutes, that'd be an eternity. Feels like every 3 or 4 seconds. Because you think about it, the average, the workplace of today is set up to distract us. It's almost out to get us, to kill our focus. It's open plan offices, focus on collaboration, everyone zipping emails to each other rather than talking to each other. And the challenge is, by the way, if you look at this research, not only are we interrupted every 3 minutes, but it can take, get this, 23 minutes to get back to the point where you were focused before you were interrupted. So you do the numbers. If you're getting interrupted every 3 minutes and it takes 23 minutes to get focused again, no wonder you feel like you're spinning your wheels, never actually getting anywhere, never getting anything done. Now, we could spend a whole hour this morning talking about how to restore focus in a team or in a workplace. But I want to give you one tip, that if you apply this tip, it will revolutionize. As soon as you get back to your office today, revolutionize how focused you can be on a daily basis. And it is simply this: turn off your email notifications. Immediately, just do it. Because here's the thing, do you know, every time you hear this sound, A new email's arrived. Do you know, every time you hear that sound, you actually get a little bit dumber. I don't know if you realize this. Okay, let's just listen for it again. Feel the intelligence draining from your being. There we go, can you feel it? Okay, because here's the thing. University College in London discovered last year that every time we hear a notification because an email's arrived, for instance, the girls here, you women, you lose 10 basis points off your effective IQ instantly. Why? Because suddenly your focus is split. Even if you don't know who the email's from or what it's about, you're already thinking of what I need to do next. Now, before you guys feel too proud that it was 10 basis points for the women, it was 15 basis points for us. Okay, that means when a bloke is distracted, he's operating at the effective IQ level of an 8-year-old, okay? You might be like, that explains a lot. Okay, but this is the challenge, our capacity to focus. So switch off email notifications. That alone will change everything. So it's about being intentional about activity. It's about being focused. But the third element to building breakthrough growth and momentum personally or within a business, third key, the C, stands for consistency. And let's be really honest, consistency is not an easy sell. I mean, we see this every year as we go to a new year, January 1st, and everyone sets New Year's resolutions. I mean, how many of you have ever set a New Year's resolution that had to do with eating better or getting fitter? You know, this was going to be your year to get healthy. Who's done this? New Year's resolution to do with health or fitness? Many of us have. And you're really intentional, you're really focused for like 3 weeks or 3 minutes, and then you revert to form, habit, what you were doing on December 31st. I love this meme that popped up on Facebook recently. I don't mean to brag, but I finished my 14-day diet in 3 hours and 12 minutes. Who here has done this out of interest? Who's done that sort of diet? Most of us have. Now, it's not that diets don't work or the gyms don't work. It's that we don't stick at them long enough to see the results. In fact, I remember Dan posting something on Facebook a few months back that I loved. He said, exercise would be so much more rewarding if calories screamed as we burnt them. And I thought that is so true. And because this is the challenge. Consistency is tough. It's a tough sell. I was speaking at a conference over at the Convention Centre a few months back for a Philex. It's the big fitness industry conference. And the speaker before me on the day was talking about the psychology of consistency. Because I didn't realise this, but he said consistency is critical to the revenue model of most people in the fitness industry. Because if you sign up for a gym and you don't consistently go, you will not re-sign next year. And so the revenue only comes in once. The huge churn rate in the fitness industry is a massive challenge. And so he talked about the psychology of consistency. If I were to break everything down into one sentence, the reason we as human beings find consistency so difficult, be it in our personal lives or our professional lives, the reason we find consistency so tough is simply this. We way overestimate the impact of our choices in the short term. Like we look for results far too quickly. But we way underestimate the impact of our choices in the long term. Now I want to prove this to you. I wonder how many of you here in the last week have eaten something that was, like the category on the left there, full of sugar, full of fat, tasted awesome. You know you shouldn't eat it. You promised yourself last time you ate it you'd never eat it again, but you did. I mean, who's eaten something that was unhealthy but awesome in the last week? Hands up if you've done this in the last week. Okay, just in the front. What's your name? Elise. Okay, yeah, I'll pick on you. Front row, sorry. What was the thing you ate in the last week? Lamb and stuff. Greek food is awesome. Okay, so let's say, just take lamb. Lamb is not truly too bad. I mean, we could have had pizza or chocolate, but let's say lamb. Let's just imagine you had the first piece of lamb, and as soon as you ate that piece of lamb, your blood pressure shot through the roof. You put on 10 kilos in all the places you don't really want to put on 10 kilos. You had a heart attack, maybe a stroke, just for good measure. Imagine after the first piece of lamb, all that stuff happened. Would you go back for the second piece of lamb? Probably not. I mean, it's like, depends how good the lamb is, really. It's like step away from the lamb because you get real-time feedback, don't you? Here's the challenge. You eat something unhealthy and nothing changes. You're like, I haven't put on weight. Blood pressure's still the same. No big difference, so you go back for the second and third and the fourth and the fifth, and it probably doesn't make a difference for 5 to 10 pieces or meals, but 15, 20, 30, that's where the impact really shows. I mean, it's like that ad from the 90s, the Pantene principle, I call it. It might not happen overnight, but it will happen. And that's the challenge with consistency. It's the compound influence of bad choices or good choices. That's where momentum kicks in. I love the comment here from John Maxwell. John Maxwell said this, "You'll never change your life," he said, "until you change something you do every day. The secret to your success," he said, "is found in your routine." It's the daily, incremental, consistent, mundane stuff. That's where breakthrough growth, momentum, success, getting at the cutting edge, that's where it lies. I was working with some mortgage brokers last week, and I was challenging them around this theme, and I said, I said to them, how many of you want to have an exceptional year in the next 12 months? And they all put up their hand. I said, well, here's the thing. Exceptional years are made up of exceptional months, which are made up of exceptional days, which are made up of exceptional hours. I mean, you can take it down to nanoseconds if you like. And I challenged them. I said, here's the thing. If you want to have an awesome year in the next year, just do this one thing alone. Make 10 phone calls, 10 sales calls before 10 a.m. every day. Just do that. Just do that alone. Because here's the challenge, though. In the first week, you do that, and not a lot changes, probably. You do that for 3 weeks, and still maybe your business isn't revolutionized, but you do that consistently for 12 months. You've made 2,400 additional phone calls. Do you reckon that makes a difference to your business in the next year? You bet. But it's the consistent, sustained, focused activity. That's what gets the breakthrough results. The interesting thing is this. Momentum is a lot of fun. I mean, there is nothing like it. That tailwind that gets behind you, where everything suddenly becomes a whole lot easier, effortless, buoyant, where everything you do just works, when you get into a groove and start going with the flow. I mean, how many of you would like to have, if you're really honest, more momentum, personally or professionally, in the next 12 months? Who would actually like more momentum? And most of us would. I certainly would. And the key message as we finish up is simply this. In order to build momentum, there is no shortcut. I wish there was. I'd probably make a whole lot more per speaking gig if there was a simple, shortcut that you could apply and takes no work and you can build momentum. There is no shortcut. There's no silver bullet, but there is a formula. And it works. Question is, what will you do with it?